Welcome to Feel, Peel, Thrive, formerly Food Feels Banana Peels, a holistic podcast created to inspire a shift in perspective. Here, we explore what it really means to feel, peel back the layers, and thrive from the inside out. Each episode invites you to consider a shift in your perspective on what it truly means to be healthy, beyond quick fixes or trends, and to see wellness as an empowered, inside-out journey rooted in awareness, accountability, and self-trust. I'm your host, Laura Pfeiffer, and I'm here to guide honest, heart-centered conversations that help you reconnect with your body, realign with your values, and live with greater clarity, connection, and vitality. Because when we learn to feel, we can heal. And when we peel back the stories that hold us back, we make space to thrive. Hi, and welcome to the podcast today. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Lynn Anderson to chat with me. Dr. Lynn is a naturopath. She's a yoga, nutrition therapist, a fitness professional, a karma master. She's a published author, an international speaker, a video producer with over 40 years of experience in natural health and wellness. Wow. Her personal journey through stress and burnout is what led her into this work. She brings such a grounded, compassionate perspective to healing and proactive aging. Dr. Lynn has been featured in Redbook, Reader's Digest, Huffington Post, Shape, Self, and many other national publications, TV networks, and podcasts. She's the creator of the Soul Walking series, including Karma, Prosperity, and Vitality, as well as the Naturopathic Wellness series, the Yoga of Nutrition, and Recipes for Health, Sex, Happiness, and Love. She also produces Dr. Lynn's proactive aging workouts and teaches weekly online classes from Sarasota. In today's conversation, we'll be talking about karma, emotions, and holistic health, and how all of these elements contribute to our overall well-being, vitality, and sense of purpose. I'm really looking forward to exploring how nourishing the body, the mind, and the spirit can support us throughout burnout and into a more aligned way of living with you. Dr. Lynn, thank you so much and welcome to Feel, Peel, Thrive today. It's awesome to have you.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It's fun to be here.
Amazing. Well, we chatted before and decided very quickly that we would have lots to talk about. You have been in the natural health field for over 40 years, which really makes you more of a pioneer. People are starting to, get online now with different perspectives than your allopathic medicine. And so tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you into natural health so long ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say, yes, you are right. Back when I started, we were called quacks. There was, the woo-woo people. And it's very interesting to me because I was, the beginning of my holistic was very much into herbs and aromatherapy. And those things were very, very new age back then. And they're becoming more and more mainstream. But what really got me on my journey was I was a single mother with 2 children, and I had not finished my undergraduate degree, so I went back to college with the 2 kids, and I was broke. I had no money. I was on welfare. I was doing work study, loans, grants, everything I could do to get myself through. But I really felt that it would make a big difference, not just in my life, but in my children's life. And it was, and I like to tell people I'm kind of one of that type A personality. So, it's like I wanted a 4.0. I got a 3.8. That was pretty close.
Very good, very good.
But I really put myself under a lot of pressure and stress. And at the end of it, even when you're normally going through school, there's a crash afterwards because you're so into the exams and papers and everything. And all of a sudden, it's like a rug is pulled out from underneath you and you have nothing. Mm-hmm. And, the next stage is either going on to school or getting a job. Mm-hmm. And I found myself at that place. And I was completely physically, mentally, and soulfully exhausted, just total burnout. And I just could feel the total crash that came in on me. And I knew that I had to build myself back up. I had 2 kids to support. I didn't have the time to lay around and feel sorry for myself. And so I began to look back into my roots where I grew up, which was on a small island off the coast of Maine. And we had practiced mostly folk medicine back then because we didn't have a doctor on the island. So unless you were really sick, you know, your aunt or your grandmother, somebody came in, gave you a little potion and helped you out, and usually it worked. And so looking at that and then really starting to explore, I would say more like fitness, exercise, and nutrition, because those were up and coming things in the field at that time. And all of those kind of just led me down the path towards becoming a naturopath. And I say that that and karma is what saved my life.
Beautiful. And I mean, that's a very condensed version, I'm sure, of what transpired to get you to here, right? I mean,
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about this in realistic terms because, somebody experiences burnout. It's not go back to school and then, just rest for a little bit and then all of a sudden you're back on track, right?
No,
Can we put a
no.
timeline with that? Like how long were you in that space whereby your physical, mental, emotional body was kind of spirit shutting down?
Well, I would say that it probably, if I really looked at it, I would say that it was a good 10-year period of going through all of this stuff, of trying to figure it all out and, work at the same time and then trying to take care of myself. And also, again, remember, I was a single woman back then, and back then it was a tough time for women. I mean,
Hmm.
we were the first women to sort of really come into the workforce and say, hey, I can be a manager. I
Hmm.
can run a company. I mean, before that,
Right.
you'd be a secretary, go to go make the coffee somewhere. And
Right.
so I also encountered that because there was a tremendous amount of force as a young woman coming in.
Hmm.
There was a lot of resistance from traditional males. So that was very difficult too. So there were ups and downs. So you're right. It's not just a trajectory where you get up and say, all right, I'm going to eat healthy and exercise, and in a week I'm out of it,
Hmm.
because there's so much in it that is the mental and the soulful. So when we talk about that, we talk about the physical, but then the karma and the yoga is what switches you into really dealing with the mental and the soulful. And that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I've been doing it for 40 years. That's a
Hmm.
long, long time.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I know, I discovered yoga 20 years ago and kind of the same thing. Like it's a very slow, beautiful process of first you come into it for the physical, a lot of us, and then you
Right.
realize there is such a mental, emotional component to this. And then the spiritual aspect for me then began to like unfold a little bit later on. So let's talk about how these implements kind of shaped what you do now.
Um, are you talking about the karma or?
Let's go into karma first. Yeah, let's
Okay.
let's
Okay.
let's explain what karma is first of all, because there are so
Okay.
many definitions, and some people think it's what I put out there comes back at me, and it's a whole lot more than that.
Right, right. Well, we have to dispel, the myth that it's good and bad. If I do something bad, bad's going to come back to me, because karma is not about good and bad, because that indicates judgment. And karma yoga is not about judgment. It's about really paying attention to what you are doing, what you are thinking, what you are saying, what you are doing, and are you doing something that's productive, that's giving, as opposed to just taking and taking and taking. So karma really is a philosophy and it's a way of life. And one of the good explanations I use for that is, let's say that I go out and I steal something. And everyone would say, well, then you're a thief. They would label me a thief. But let's say I never get caught. Well, how does karma come in there?
Mm.
Because if you listen to it, if I steal something stolen from me or I get caught, and let's say I never get caught, but my entire life, my energy is affected by me looking over my shoulder. Am I going to get caught? Am I ducking and dodging? So that's the karma. That's how you create the karma. So it's not that I immediately got something back for something that I did, but I have to carry that weight with me. And that weight, until I remove that weight, I'm going to keep living through that cycle of karma.
Beautiful. A lot more complex than just a simple
Uh,
give and take. And it adds up. And that's
Yes.
the thing. And when we are in essentially this vibration, let's say this energy, we
Hmm.
are attracting more of that. So sure, you have that initial incident on your shoulders, if you will, but now you begin playing this out in other areas of your life. You're carrying that energy around. Let's talk about how that manifests eventually, maybe, and how it could affect us.
Well, you've lied, you've stolen, now you're paranoid, all of those things, anxious, all of those things add in. And then as you meet people, you're not going to tell them, well, I'm a thief. Okay, but you're going to try to hide that. So now you're not being honest with people. So how does that lead into your relationships with people? Because what's important is our deep relationships need to have honesty and
Hmm.
trust. And so you've undermined that. And let's just say fabricate that you've been married to someone for 20 years and you stole something really big, diamonds or something, the Louvre, you're part of that or whatever. And you've got children, and all of a sudden the cops show up at your door and arrest you someday. I mean, it's not just yourself you've affected your mate, your parents, your children, and it goes on and on and on. And so the karma starts to spin itself, not just in you, but in your heirs, and it goes forward. Yeah.
Okay, so that is beautiful, and I'm sure lots of people can align with that, not necessarily the stealing, but we tell a little lie, something,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden that exact thing, you get paranoid, you're carrying this with you, it becomes a big weight and heavy burden and all of these
Hmm.
things. Let's talk about how we can work with that on our journeys to heal it, to resolve
Hmm.
it, to release what we have been carrying from a heavy burden perspective.
Hmm. Well, it's being consciously aware and not suppressing things down and bringing things up to the surface and being able to address those kinds of things within yourself, which is a very difficult thing for humans to do,
Hmm.
because it shows our fallacies. It shows that, and we all are. None of us are perfect, and so you have to bring those things up and then you have to find effective ways to deal with them. That's what, burning out your karma. You're burning out those things because karma does believe in reincarnation, and we don't want to
Hmm.
carry those as we bring them into the next life. So it's
Yes.
a process, and it takes a long time sometimes of working with individuals who can help you to bring those things to the surface. And again, like you said, it's not doesn't have to be something big like stealing. It can be, things that happen in childhood, or things that you really need to address. Someone has been abused as a child or adopted, or whatever it is, or gone through a bad marriage or whatever it is. Those things need to come up to the surface, and we need to address those, and they need to be addressed in a way that is productive for you, not destructive, not, oh, you bad person. It needs to come up in a way that we realize that all we are all at our basis, we are all pure, wonderful people. That's who we are, beings. It's
Hmm.
just we get caught up in this world, and this is not a utopian world. It is not a peaceful, wonderful world, and it never will be. That's not the nature of
Right.
life. Yeah. But
Right.
we're here to learn from those things. So when you encounter those things, when you encounter that kind of stuff, it's what you do with it that determines your karma.
Yes. And I love that you brought up it comes forward with you from other lifetimes. I absolutely align with that path as well. And obviously everyone has the right to decipher what works for them and what doesn't. And there are definitely have been times in my own healing journey working with the shamanic tools and all the angelic work and things, and I've learned to process a lot. And there are definitely times that I know I'm like, this isn't mine. It's either ancestral or it's something that has come forward because I am like, I can remember one time I was preparing for a yoga retreat in Costa Rica. And it was a pivotal time. It was a beautiful experience. And I always take a few days before just to ground in, get myself prepared. And I had this. emotional release sitting in a meditation it was huge. Like it was just like this rush that came over me, and I was sobbing and heaving, and like it just felt like it was just something so deep, and it had no I didn't understand it from what I had lived because you kind of move through things, right? You move through kind of this lifetime, if you will, and then you might get into other things that you've carried forward. And so it was just like this huge revelation that, wow, like I know I was holding this, but and I have no idea where this came from. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important too. I know it is. One of my teachers had said to me, like, Laura, you don't always have to know. And we get very caught up in our minds about I need to put, and I am absolutely, I'm a Libra, I'm an air sign. It's, mind is very, very dominant. I have to work I don't have, that's a story. I do my best to remain grounded and do the practices that I need to do to remain grounded because I am naturally drawn into my head. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are things that we can't necessarily explain. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important for listeners to know that we don't always have to attach a meaning or an explanation to everything that happens. And when we begin working with something deep like karma, some of us will receive certain information, some intuitives, some guides, some people themselves, but it will move through us in different ways.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And it's important to remember that there's a thing called epigenetics. And what that means is, and we all are a product of the genetic code that's passed down. And I would just share with you and my audience that I had discovered that I am the reincarnation of my seventh generation grandmother. And I found, and it has all come to me, through different things. And I inherited things from her that, I didn't know where these things came from that were part of my personality. And part of the things that I was scolded for as a child, well, where did you get that from? Because I was a very defiant and independent type of child, and a very creative child in a place that people couldn't understand that. And then I began to understand, I mean, I inherited this stuff, and we do inherit things from different generations, and it's passed down through the generations. And that's kind of how reincarnation works and karma, you know?
Beautiful. Yeah, it's when you really begin to dive into it, it's very, very interesting. Very
Mm-hmm.
interesting the way that everything is interconnected. We are interconnected through all these different generations and lifetimes and the wounding that we bring forward. There, for my lineage, there is a lot of self-worth wounding, especially in the women. And that has been something that I have been working with for years. And I love the fact that I am seeing the manifestation of that work. Obviously, I'm feeling it in myself, but my children are not showing up with the same self-worth issues that I
Mm-hmm.
had, my mom, my aunts, my grandmother, likely my great grandmothers, like all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. And it's such a when we do begin to embark on this healing journey, it's important to understand that yes, we are, doing this for ourselves, but there is a huge ripple effect outward onto those in our lineage, people around us, our immediate relationships, and even, further beyond when we start to do this, and it really shows the interconnection that we all have.
Hmm. But it's also, again, it's about being consciously aware. Awareness is a huge thing. Awareness usurps intellect every day of the week. And we as, we tend to suppress awareness because things come up. And when you are aware of these things, like, for example, that there has been this lack of self-worth that is just perpetuated itself, and you could have just carried that forward.
Hmm.
But by becoming aware of it, then you sit there and you have a choice. You can either work it through or you can continue to live it through, and you'll pass it on to the next generation, and it goes on and on and on.
Hmm.
But when you stop and you're aware and you are confronted with the challenge and you meet the challenge, then you have an opportunity to change your karma and your future karma and the
Yes.
karma that goes on throughout the generations that you're passing on. And what do you want to pass on? You want to pass on healthy body, mind, and soul to
Hmm.
future generations. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that they don't have to struggle with things the way that we have, right? We incarnate at a time for specific reasons, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
purposes, things like that. And when it's a beautiful thing when you start to, like you said, kind of recognize and become aware of what's going on so that you can choose, no, and this has been my experience lots of times, and as we all kind of embark on this healing journey, you recognize something, you're like, hang on a second. This has been here before. I
Mm-hmm.
know this. Usually I would do A, but when I do A, every single time this is what happens and it comes around again. So this time I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to choose B. And then
Right.
with B, it becomes an opportunity. Okay, so I handled this differently. Was this the way to resolve
Mm-hmm.
that karma, essentially? And then can I move forward from it? And then it's we're done. Or, do I need to come back to it again? The universe will show me, and I'm gonna try C next time. I know A and B don't work, so here we go with C. So I
Right.
love that
Right.
because conscious choice is something that honestly is newer for me. It's not something
Mm-hmm.
that I ever knew that I had from conditioning from being young. I grew up in a home that was very much about do as I say, children are seen but not heard. And unlike you, who was like, forget it, I'm gonna go for it. I was the one who decided just to take everything on and to listen and to play roles and
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes this whole like discovery of self when you've taken on all of these different roles in order to appease people outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it always very, very interesting when I chat with different people about how their journeys have unfolded, right? You
Mm-hmm.
obviously
Mm-hmm.
had this element of self-confidence and self-worth, and you knew that you knew you could do it to some degree, no?
Well, I'll change it a little bit. First up, I want to state that we as human beings always go to the familiar. We like the familiar. It's familiar. If you've been abused, it's familiar to be abused and to abuse, and it goes on and on and
Mm-hmm.
on. And when we pull back from that, and the curtain pulls back, and it's like, oh, there's something else I have to look at. That can be a real shock to most people. But to answer your question, yeah, I grew up in a little village where, being defiant and independent was not in the cards. You were supposed to go to work and support the village, and you were supposed to stay in the village, and you were supposed to marry the boy in the village, and that's what you were supposed to do. And again, the same thing, you just keep your mouth shut,
Mm-hmm.
do what you're told. And I was the kid who always went, why? Well, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to. Well, I don't want to stay here. I want to go. And
Right.
so I was very much chastised for that. And when you're a child and you're in a small village, now remember the village, everyone's related to everybody. And think about a little tiny village somewhere. There was like 500 people on my island. And you stand out, you're different. It is a very hard thing to go through because you are always, as they use the term, the black sheep. You're
Mm-hmm.
always the one on the outside that people are going, what's wrong with her? And as a child, you take that on. You go, what's wrong with me? Why
Right.
can't I conform? Why can't I be like everybody else? It would be so much easier if I
Mm-hmm.
could. And yet there was something that said to me, you have to break out of this. You have to go. And I
Mm-hmm.
did. And it was not easy. It was not easy. It is not easy to leave a village where everybody knows everybody and everybody supports everybody and go out into a world where there is nobody.
Mm-hmm.
There's no aunt around the corner. There's no grandmother to run to. There's nobody there. You are
Mm-hmm.
on your own. And you don't have the skills. I did not have the skills to deal with the real world. And that was part of the whole burnout and everything, was learning
Right.
that, wow, this world out here is pretty tough.
For sure. But
Yeah.
what a courageous journey that you had the courage to move out of what you knew wasn't in alignment for you and for your path and your trajectory forward. And that's exactly what came up as you were saying that. Let's talk let's talk a little bit about people who feel those callings, because
Hmm.
sometimes people feel, and I know I felt it, like this isn't the life that I want. I don't want to be doing this job. This isn't the relationship that I want. What can you tell us about that and navigating it and perspective on it?
Well, there's something inside. All I can say is that you can't push it down. You
Hmm.
can't push it down. It keeps coming up. It keeps surfacing up. And you realize that there's only one direction and you have to take that direction. You
Hmm.
cannot not take that direction or you'll go crazy. I mean, that's how
Hmm.
I felt. I'll be
Hmm.
a crazy person if I don't follow that. And yes, it does take courage, but I would say in my youth, it was more naivete than it was courage. I was like, I can do this, I can do this. And then you get out and you get kicked, you get slapped, you get
Hmm.
beaten down, and you realize that the world is comprised of these tremendous challenges. And, we live in a world, and it's always been that way, where there is, people who will always put you down. There are
Hmm.
people who will always come after you. There are wars, there are famine. If you don't come from the right side of the tracks, you're not going to get the opportunities, and you're going to be made fun of. And,
Hmm.
that is, it's not a very pleasant side of
Hmm.
humanity,
Hmm.
but it exists. And we
Right.
can't we can't get up and say, well, let's kumbaya, let's have peace all over the world and
Hmm.
let's because it doesn't exist. So what happens is it's coming up and it's confronting that. And then what do you do? Do you buy into it with them? Do you take the people below you and kick them?
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's a way. Or do you lift them up and then try to reach out and do as much as you can to connect and help people?
Hmm.
And that's when you do that, when you make that shift, it shifts everything in your world because the people that are the negative, they just sort of fade away.
Hmm.
You see a toxic person and you go, bye.
Right.
That's how you build the courage to be
Right.
able to do it. Yeah.
The
But you got
boundaries.
but you got to take enough knocks. You got to be
Sure.
knocked down enough times and pull yourself up. And, it sounds good. And I know people will come up to me and they'll say, oh, Dr. Lynn, you're so calm and peaceful in your teaching and everything. And I say to them, I have a husband. I have children. I have grandchildren. I've been through a divorce. I've been poor. It's a process.
Yes.
Life is not easy for anyone. It really isn't. Even people, and believe me, I lived in Hollywood land. I lived in Los Angeles for over 30 years, right in the mixed of all of the Hollywood whole thing. And I worked with very, very wealthy people who were miserable,
Hmm.
miserable, and crying about their life. And I'm thinking, you guys can't get a life here, you know.
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah.
and that brings me to the thought of, you say pick people up around you and, show up in a positive way. It all starts with ourselves, right? Like
Right.
we want to be positive for people around us and whatnot. And I know in my journey, I I I authentically wanted that, but I couldn't do that because I wasn't doing it for me. So even if we have these urges to help and support, because I always wanted to help and support outside, right? I
Hmm.
always knew that there was this calling.
Hmm.
But until we start working inside, I don't believe that we have the capacity at that level to support people in the way that we would perhaps like to. All love comes from self-love. So if we don't love ourselves, then we're not going to be able to show up authentically from a perspective of, love and compassion and all those things in our journeys.
Right. Yeah, you can mouth that stuff out there and it's just words, but it's
Yeah.
got to come from, it's got to come from inside. It's got to come from an understanding of human nature and what we
Hmm.
all go through because we all share the same things. We all want happiness. We
Hmm.
all want love. We all know what it feels like to be down, to be up, to have those different kinds of emotions and things. And it's being able to really, you do have to, as they say, physician heal thyself.
Hmm.
That is, Hippocrates. physician, heal thyself. And that is the motto for a naturopath as well, is that unless I can, if I was sitting here and I weighed 300 pounds and I had a cigarette hanging out of my mouth, and I'm
Right.
telling you I'm a naturopathic doc, I mean, I'm really exaggerating here, but I had to heal myself first. I had to go in and I had to do the nutritional stuff, do all of those
Hmm.
things, follow the
Right.
path in order to be able to give to other people. Otherwise, I'm just blowing smoke, which there's many, many people out there that are doing that.
There. Yeah, and
And,
it's becoming more and more known in society who is actually talking the talk and walking the walk, or who's just talking and not
it,
walking.
exactly, exactly. And it's sad because some people get innocently caught up in
Yeah.
it. And, I am one of those people that, I mean, I can't even fathom lying and cheating people and fraud and doing, and, to me,
Hmm.
it doesn't even compute in my brain to do that. I mean, I was the kind of naturopathic doctor that people would come to me and I would say, all right, we'll work for 6 weeks and I'll get you there in, let's say, 6 weeks or 2 months. And then go and
Right.
do, rather than keeping, and I cut my throat. There goes there goes my
Right.
money, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you have to have clients in order to be able to support yourself. But it was amazing how many people would send people to me, how many
Hmm.
referrals would come back, and things would come in, and because people knew that I wasn't there to take advantage. I wanted them to be able to go off and do it on their own and not be dependent on me,
Yes. And I
you
think
know?
that's the mark of a really good practitioner is someone who helps support you and helps you with tools that you can work with yourself,
Hmm.
and then supports you to the point that you can walk on your own. It's
Right.
not about coming back all the time. You know, I always think of, and I'm not trying to give like chiropractors a bad name, but something like that where you're always coming back and people, you need an adjustment, you need an adjustment, you need an adjustment. It's like, hang on a second, there's a root of something here that is imbalanced. So
Right.
instead of treating the symptom, let's find the root. And that's the beauty of a lot of us holistic health practitioners, the way that we operate, and not everyone. You always have to do your homework
Yep.
in who you trust to support you on your journey, and trust your gut and how it feels when you're with that person. But there are a lot of people who are, you know, operating from that mind, body, spirit wholeness
Hmm.
perspective.
Hmm.
And that, in my experience, is the way to health. That's how I found my health. And it wasn't just because I was eating really well, exercising, doing yoga. Like that wasn't the only key. And this is where a great segue for us to chat a little bit further, because a lot of times, you get, okay, so eat these foods and do your exercise and everything's going to be fine, right? Like you're going to
Yeah.
lose your weight, you're going to do all this stuff, and it's like, hang on a second, like what about the mental, emotional, spiritual bodies? Can we talk a little bit about how kind of your perspective and how those integrate and do form a whole human being?
Hmm. Well, with yoga, yoga, the physical part of yoga, is really just there so that we can understand the mental and the soulful part of it. So people get that mixed up. And I've always said to everyone, if you go to a yoga class and there's nothing there but just exercise, you're in a calisthenic class.
Yes.
And so when you come to a yoga class, what is the teacher bringing? And I'll give you an example. And I've been doing this for years, and I have stacks of letters, and I have people all the time, and it's not ego, but come up to me and say, God, no one's ever taught a class like this. But when I come to class, I always have a reading, and the reading
Hmm.
has some kind of a thread that's going to go through the class. And as we go through the class, like say it was courage one week, and we get to the warrior pose. And then we talk about courage. And so we
Hmm.
bounce courage through the poses so that the students understand that when you do a pose, it's because if we physically come in first, then we can mentally draw in and then we can soulfully connect all of that. But if you
Hmm.
just do the physical part, yeah, your back will get strong and your legs will get strong and your breathing will get better, and yeah, and your mind might be a little lifted, but you'll walk out of the class and you haven't gotten the whole point. of what it's
Hmm.
about, because you are, it all starts up here. You are what you think. What you
Hmm.
think up here is what you project out. And so
Hmm.
it's important to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. That is very much in alignment with how I teach too, which is
Hmm.
obviously why you and I hit it off right from the get-go, weaving some thread of teaching and learning, right? It becomes an experience. It's not just a physical moving your body. It's a whole mind, body, spirit experience. And so
Hmm.
that's why when people come to yoga class or they'll say, "Oh, I tried yoga once and I didn't like it." And you know, and it's like, "Okay, hang on a second here." Like,
Yeah.
you know, everybody teaches differently, and if we can be, you know, open to
Hmm.
alternative perspectives, because that's essentially what you're doing and what I'm doing is bringing our own perspective on being into
Hmm.
each class and then imparting that information, and people get to decide whether it aligns for them or whether they don't, it doesn't
Hmm.
align for them, but it becomes this opportunity for sharing an experience and moving deeper than the surface physical
Hmm.
form of practice that, you know, sometimes yoga is.
Well, and I will tell you, the times that I've had people come up to me after a class and say, "How did you know I needed that? How did you
Yeah.
know that was what I needed
Uh-huh.
today?" And I always say, "Well, when the student's ready, the teacher appears." And I
Yeah.
didn't know that you needed that pep today. You didn't know you needed it, but you put it out there. And sometimes students come and say, "That was great. I really enjoyed that. It's wonderful." And then the next time they'll come in, you'll get that, "Wow, that's what I needed to." So
Hmm.
it's really, it's yoga is about, it's a philosophy of life. That's what it is.
Yep.
It's not an exercise program.
Hmm.
But you cannot, as I say to my students, if I sit here and we talk about and intellectualize about balance, let's say, what it means to be balanced, body, mind, and soul. You'll nod your head and nod your head. But if I take you onto the mat and get you to balance, and I talk you through that, and you bring your body, mind, and soul, then you get it. We don't get it by just talking. We have to experience it.
Yes.
And that is the essence of yoga. That's what
Hmm.
it's about on the mat. And, and I think that's, if students get that, then they are, as I say to them, if you come to class and you just get that little bit and you breathe and you don't do half of what I ask you to do, you've done
Hmm.
yoga today. And those who've
Yes.
done everything and haven't gotten any of it, they didn't do yoga today.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right. So, so let's talk a little bit about the emotional component because we haven't got into emotions yet today. We've talked, you know, a little bit about mind, a little bit about body. How about the emotional aspect of our balance, imbalance practices, these kinds of things?
Well, of course, the emotions all come from, the mind, and emotions are very deceptive. They are very deceptive. It's like, someone will come up and, they're feeling down because they're getting some gray hair, or I'll give you an example of, I had a student and she was a lovely lady, lovely young lady, a little hippie, bigger in the hips. And she came up to me one day and she was just so upset because of her hips and da 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 da. And I looked at her and I said, every time I see you, I see this beautiful young woman with a gorgeous smile. I've never really noticed. And she
Hmm.
looked at me, she was shocked, and it was
Hmm.
like, so her emotion was going to the negative, finding all the things that she
Hmm.
could criticize herself about. But if
Hmm.
she lifted herself up and she looked at her beautiful smile and her beautiful skin and her beautiful face, it changes her emotional outlook, you know. So emotions, I say, are deceptive, and they
Hmm.
take us in all kinds of directions. And so what yoga teaches us is when the emotions come up, if you can, and this takes tremendous work, step back, observe, let it go. Watch it
Hmm.
float up.
Hmm.
But that takes tremendous work. And it's, a lot of strength to be able to do that because we are reactionary. You know,
Exactly.
if someone says something to you, if you're married, and we all this, and married people, things happen. Your husband says something and you turn around and you snap at them, and and it's like, why did you do that? But it takes a lot to take that deep
Mhm.
breath and approach it
Right.
in a different way.
Right. One of the things that I learned on my own journey in finding emotional regulation, and it has been a very, very long process, I have to say, learning to emotionally regulate myself as an adult, because it wasn't taught to me as a child. It wasn't safe to feel my emotions as a child,
Hmm.
so it became very unsafe for many, many different emotions. And so one of the things that I learned that I find so interesting, and this is the mind part of me that puts it in context, is that emotions happen in the body due to an experience 2/100ths of a second before anything happens in our mind. And so
Hmm.
when we can get to that point that we are connected enough to our bodies, and this is what I work a lot with somatics with people, connecting them to their bodies. So I know where I hold this emotion, and when I'm
Hmm.
feeling this emotion in me, for me, anxiety, chest, heart palpitations like you would
Yep.
not believe, instead of going right into that nervous system loop that, like you talked
Hmm.
about with that young woman, the nervous system loop that says, I'm ugly, my hips are too big, I this, I that, all of this kind of stuff. It's like, hang on a second. I feel this emotion in my body, and now I get to pause. And instead of coming into that reactionary, experience, becomes an opportunity just to notice, like you said, notice, allow it. And don't get me wrong, I am not perfect at this. This is a journey that I continue to work with, and I
Hmm.
feel like it can be a lifelong journey just to gets this emotional regulation in order, if you will. And I think we're not going to be perfect. None of us are going to be perfect, right? There are going to be times where something happens and we react in a way perhaps that would be less than optimal. And that's okay, and part of
Hmm.
that self-love part is, okay, having compassion. You know what? Take it on the cheek. I know that I reacted inappropriately or my behavior was this. Still love myself. It's okay. It's
Okay.
okay. And I'm going to do better next time. Here's my apology, and move forward.
But the key is you took that moment, you, me, all of us. If you take that moment and you step back and say, boy, I could do better at that, or I could correct that, or whatever it is, that's awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's working your karma. It's when you know what, you said something and you really hurt my feelings, blah, 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 and I go at you, and I don't take that pullback and say, what, wait a minute, why am I bringing on this? If I'm angry with someone, the anger's in me. I'm carrying the anger, and we all know what anger feels like. The body tenses up. You're right. You have that, gut feeling. That's what happens in your body. But it's very difficult to take that breath and to stop and feel it and then make the decision, do I really want to carry this around? I'm the one carrying it. I'm the one
Mm-hmm.
all twisted up inside,
Right.
So it's a journey of really becoming aware of what is happening within and
Mm-hmm.
without. 'Cause,
Absolutely.
you know,
And that is almost like projection in relationship, right? That you're essentially talking about. And I've talked about this before, and I think it's really important to understand that what we see in others is often a reflection of what is inside of us. So if I see you as beautiful and talented and knowledgeable and all of these things, then this is actually the reason I can see that is because it's in me. And if I
yes,
see you as, like as
competition.
defiant,
Yes.
like all of these things, then that's actually something inside of me, a shadow part, a part that I'm not acknowledging likely, that
Hmm.
actually is my own stuff to work with. And when we
Hmm.
begin to bring awareness to some of these things, and we keep coming back to this word awareness, we bring awareness to some of these things, the way that we thought things were isn't necessarily how they are.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and we're kind of taught to follow that path, but you're absolutely right. That's what awakening is about. That's what the expansion of consciousness is about,
Hmm.
is looking at the world, just looking at the world objectively without
Hmm.
pushing your judgment and all of that in there, which we all do. I mean, that's the way we're programmed as human beings, to
Hmm.
judge one another, right? To compete with one another. We are,
Hmm.
and when you remove that, things look very differently, extremely
Yes.
differently.
Yes.
It's funny because I taught a yoga class this morning, and I teach at a hospital, and I have a lot of older students that come in, and there's these two women that come in, and I say this, and I'm saying this, they're older, they're probably not the most attractive women if you just looked that way, but they have the most beautiful smiles. And I walked out today, and I saw them, I waved goodbye to them, and I said, oh, they are so pretty, they're so cute, because they had this sparkle, they had a smile. And that's what was beautiful within them. And I could look at them and they smile all the time. And there is a beautiful person. But we have this thing about beauty, this is the right weight, you have to have this color hair, these da da
Hmm.
da da da. And beauty, that's not necessarily beauty. Because I can
No.
tell you, again, I'll go back to Hollywood. I know some classically beautiful Hollywood people, and they are the nastiest people you can imagine. So beauty is really that comes out, that beautiful energy that comes out.
Yes, and when you notice the beauty within yourself, you can notice the beauty within other people as well.
Exactly. Exactly, exactly. Because, we are all different. We're equal, but we are all very different. And we tend to label. And when you remove the labels, you begin to see the essence. The essence is the soul of a person. And the soul of the person is where the beauty comes from.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's really where it comes from.
Right. My partner and I, when we met maybe about 6 years ago, and it was one of those online things. He didn't have a picture online. He had a tiny Buddha quote that spoke to my soul, and part of his bio was something like, "Is there anyone out there as beautiful on the inside as they are on the outside?" And it spoke directly to me because I had always said that I feel like people just see me outside, like they don't see me, like, and so it's these things that, I don't know, I feel like, if there are people out there who are searching for, that a beautiful relationship, and they're not coming across the person that they're looking for, then look inside. I know I'm kind of going off on a kind of side tangent, but on my own journey after my divorce, when I was starting to get back into dating, I was attracting these people that were so like lonely, and gosh, they were exhausting. They were, their self-worth was low. They were just everything. And I was like, what is going on? And then as I began to work more and more on myself, these more beautiful people started coming in, and I was like, wow. So the more awareness that we have for ourselves, the
Mhm.
more self-care, self-love, the more introspective work that we're willing to do, and willing to look at the things that are beautiful, but also the parts of us that are still parts of us and are important parts of us that are shadow, that are the parts that we don't necessarily want to show other people. They're the parts that we often repress within ourselves and we don't want to acknowledge. When we become aware of all of these aspects of ourself, we bring consciousness to it, then we can consciously choose about how we manifest some of these shadow parts in our lives as well.
Mhm. Well, most people don't realize that we have this thing called free will. And that means, and you use the word choose. We can choose, but we're so programmed that we don't have those choices. I mean,
Yeah.
I can choose to get up in the morning and I can choose to smile and be friendly to everybody, or I can walk around like sour. I mean,
Yeah.
I have the power to be able
Hmm.
to do that.
Hmm.
And that is very important. You are not destined to be in a box. You can
Hmm.
come out of that box and you can choose to be whatever you want to be. You can choose to be good, you can choose to be bad, you can choose whatever you want. It is your choice. there are consequences.
Mm-hmm.
That's what karma tells. There are
Mm-hmm.
consequences, so
Right.
be very careful what you choose. Pay attention to what you're
Absolutely.
choosing.
And part of what I know on my own journey was unraveling the conditioning that had me thinking, had me giving my power away in all of these
Mm,
different, right? Because when we have choice, we are in our power. When we give our power away, we think that we don't have choices about things. I don't have anything to do with my health. I need my doctor to help me, or whoever, right? I mean, and it goes in all these different areas of our lives, and when you start calling that power back and realizing, hang
mhm.
on a second, it's not that person's fault. It's me who decided to subconsciously likely to give that power to somebody else. Now I have to consciously call it back and, make the choice to choose differently.
Right, because you can't change that person. You can't change anybody. They have to change within themselves. And you're right, when we give our power away, we deplete ourselves physically, mentally, and soulfully. And that's when people get sick. That's when they get overstressed, they get burnout, they get physically sick and mentally sick. And then what good are you to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
So keeping your power is a very important thing to do, but it is also can be very misplaced and misused. We have to be very, very careful with power,
Yes.
and and we see it all the time. We see power being abused, and people sometimes, get it and use it in ways that are not good, but then we see people with great power that use it for good. And that's a beautiful thing to see.
Yes. And that path of awareness helps us to understand healthy and unhealthy power. If we are calling on ourselves and saying, okay, is this holding ourselves accountable, I guess is kind of where
Mhm.
I'm going with holding ourselves accountable for the choices and actions that we take, and then having those practices. For me, it's practices, but maybe there are other ways that people do this. Practices that some way to stop and to pause and to, assess and to recognize that this decision that I'm making is from an authentic place. It's from the highest good for myself and for those around, and having like being humble with our decisions, not like we're seeing right now in plays of power in various areas. There is, no humility whatsoever. And we are, as the people are left relatively powerless because some few choose that they are so far superior and have done everything that they can to really oppress and remove any kind of power that the people
Mhm.
could have.
But that again is the history of humanity. There will always be those people in power. It's not going to end. And that's what I tell, a lot of my students will come in and they'll be like, and today, there's so much social media and they're anxious. Oh, the
Mm-hmm.
world is terrible, da da da.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, wait a minute. The world isn't any worse than it was thousands of years ago. There were those that were oppressed, there were slaves, there was
Mm-hmm.
war, there was famine, there were all these things, and there always will be the
Mm-hmm.
haves and the have-nots that will always exist. But you don't have to buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
Within yourself. You can
Right.
find that peace within yourself. We all have power over ourselves. We have power over our family. We have power over our children. We have power over the people we work with, all of this stuff. The question is, do you take that power and do you use it to rule or do you use it to lead? Big difference. And when you
Sure.
see someone who has tremendous power in this world, and you can see the ones who lead
Mm.
as opposed to rule, and
Yes.
the ones that lead oftentimes are defeated
Mm-hmm.
because rule and power is very strong, but they teach us something
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. They teach
Yes.
us, and there's a big difference between
Mm-hmm.
ruling and leading.
Mm-hmm.
Leading gives the freedom to people.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And again, it comes back to, I guess, perception and awareness within.
Hmm.
So, and you talk about, social media and stuff. I'm very much not involved in news and all of that for a very, very long time. I'm very empathic, and I find it that the chaos just sends me into a tailspin, and so I need to just, do. But that being said, I'm aware and informed, but I'm not consumed by it. And I have a lot of people, I know a lot of people, clients, friends, people in my life who tend to be more in the watching news multiple times a day,
Yeah.
taking in information from different places that may or may not actually be a reliable source, and then having to navigate all of that within themselves, and it perpetuates, right? We bring in, good energy, positivity, all of these things. If that's what's in our social feed, well, then we're going to be feeding that within ourselves. But
Hmm.
if we are immersed in in what's going on from kind of a more of a negative, if you will, aspect, the same thing is going to happen within ourselves. And so there becomes this like boundary. This is one of the first things I say to people, like, you need to consider putting up a boundary with some of that stuff. Like if you're going squirrely inside, the last thing you need to do is spend, an hour on social media every day. That's not
Hmm.
going to be supportive.
And they won't miss anything. You don't miss
Right.
anything. You can go back a week later and same stuff will be there.
Right.
You're really not missing anything. I mean, yes, it is good to be informed because you can make better decisions and you can, whatever you're doing, you can do it much more effectively and than being totally uninformed. But we have to be very careful how much of that stuff we feed in because the problem is that in today, which is really sad, is that nobody trusts anybody.
Hmm.
And and it goes all the way down from our political leaders to our doctors to our judges to our police to our teachers. It goes
Hmm.
all the way down and you see people going, I don't know who to trust anymore. There's no
Hmm.
truth out there. And
Yeah.
it comes back to the real truth is within yourself. You have to find the truth within yourself. And that truth is a tough journey. It's a tough journey to go through. But when you begin to go down that path, you begin to be able to remove that toxic energy. And you don't have to trust anyone or anything. You trust yourself.
Yes.
If you can't trust yourself, you're in big trouble.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and a beautiful segue, Dr. Lynn. Thank you. We are nearing the end of our time together today. I knew it would go quick. We said it would
I,
go quick. But that did bring up like a final question for me, that you talked about truth, and if somebody is beginning to, it essentially is an awakening, right? And there are people who claim to be woke, and there are people who actually, I believe, begin on the journey of awakening. And so if
mhm.
somebody is feeling the call to really call from their inner truth, it calls you, and eventually it's like, okay, I have to do something. What would be some advice or guidance that you might tell someone who is just beginning to understand that things aren't exactly as they seem, and there's something inside, and what do I do?
Well, if they're looking to get inside and to find that inner person and to find that inner trust there, it begins with a very quiet place. You have to be able to quiet the mind and the body and get into that quiet place. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And so it's more of being able to take the time to pull away from things and then just look at some things without judgment and just observe things that are going on around you, and then to come to the realization that exactly what's going on around us right now has been going around thousands of years before, and it'll be going around 1,000 years from now. And what we think is really good behavior right now, 1,000 years from now will be considered bad behavior. Just like if you look back 1,000 years ago, people go, oh, that's terrible. But that was the way it was. That was the way life was at that time. And we are not any different. We will be. So it's trusting you trust the goodness within yourself. And we all have that goodness. And that goodness isn't necessarily going to make you the richest person in the world or the most powerful person in the world. But it's certainly, if you can tap into that and you can live your life from there, it will make you give you the two things that are the most important and after health, and that is happiness and liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got health, happiness, and liberation, you've made it. You've done it. You know. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Health, happiness, and liberation. Those absolutely, I think, sum up what a lot of humans are looking for right now, right? And when we have all of those three, even just glimpses, because I don't have all of those all of the time. Don't get me wrong,
Yes,
but
it's
even
moving.
exactly, but even just glimpses of those on the journey, it's it's such a beautiful experience
Hmm.
to know and to understand that that I also that I've created this, or I've co-created this, right? This isn't
Hmm.
something that is outside of me. I
No,
don't need something outside of me to
make you
complete
happy.
me, or to, yeah, exactly, or to make me happy. So I love that. I love that, releasing the judgment and leaning into silence and quieting the noise, and looking at perspective are beautiful beginnings that you've offered. Thank you for people who are looking to begin that journey.
And one thing I would just add, because it's, I am, and it's been a long, long journey, but I am a very happy person. And I say to people, I'm very happy. I might not be happy with the situation that's happening around me. Let's say something happened. I might not be happy with that situation, but that doesn't disturb the happiness within me.
Mhm.
And when you can get to that place, you can discern and you can balance out things in life. You're going to have to deal with those situations. But if you deal with them from a place of contentment, which is what happiness is within yourself, it's so much easier to deal with the challenges that we all face. We're
Mhm.
all on a journey of working. Just
Mhm.
some people are farther down the road due to circumstances or age or whatever. But find that inner peace and happiness, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Lynn. It's been a lovely conversation today. I really enjoyed where this went. I'm always excited and inspired after I talk to people, just learning so much more. If people wanted to get in contact with you, Dr. Lynn, to learn a little bit more about what you do, because you offer some online programming as well, you don't have to be in Sarasota to work with you. Where would they connect?
They can go to my website, which is drlynn.com. It's spelled out DOCTORLYNN.com. If they go there, everything's there. They can find out about me, about my books, my classes, my consultations. All of that stuff is listed there. And, drop me an email. I'll be happy to send a reply back to anybody.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time. It was lovely
Thank you.
chatting with you today. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope to do it again.
Thanks. We will.
Excellent. Bye for now. Thanks so much for tuning in to Feel, Peel, Thrive. I'm so grateful you're here and part of this space for reflection and growth. If something from today's episode spoke to you, please share it with a friend or someone who might need it. And take a moment to rate, comment, or leave a short review for me on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. It really helps the podcast to grow and keeps these conversations flowing to more people who are ready to shift how they see health and healing. Together, we can help more people feel, peel, and thrive from the inside out.